From Beijing, where the import taxes raised by the U.S. on $200 billion of Chinese goods has taken effect. The duty on Chinese products was raised to 25%. China's Commerce Ministry said it would take the necessary countermeasures but has so far given no details. This comes ahead of the second day of trade talks between the two countries. The U.S. and Chinese trade negotiators failed to reach any breakthrough on the first day of talks. But the White House says the two sides have agreed to continue their discussions. Following the talks, China's top trade negotiator Liu He has said the rise in U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will not solve anything. For more on this, we are joined by our Beijing correspondent, Patrick Fock. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us. So how will these new tariffs impact the Chinese economy?
Well, look, that's very hard to say, and there is a debate out there at the moment. But this morning, interestingly, the central bank published an article saying that it would hurt the Chinese economy in terms of growth by just 0.3%. Many analysts believe that's not the case. They believe that it would have a much wider impact on the Chinese economy, and that China may struggle to hit 6% GDP growth in the next year. But it does give you an idea, though, that China is certainly confident about any potential outcomes economically as a result of these tariffs, and that may well indeed be why it's decided to perhaps change its approach to these negotiations. And the other thing is that you might be wondering is what exactly has gone through the calculations of Chinese leaders as well as negotiators. Perhaps they've just decided that even if they do give in to the concessions and the deal is done, that it's not in their best interest, and perhaps it's just better for them to accept the consequences of the trade war.
And Patrick, we just mentioned that duties on Chinese products have been raised to 25%. So what effect can these increased duties have on the ongoing trade talks?
Well, as far as we know, the discussions are going to continue, but what we already know is that the tariffs kicked in at 12 o'clock GMT today, so it's unlikely that they can be removed even if the discussions do continue. Liu He was originally scheduled to come to Washington for 3 days for negotiations. He is now just coming for 2 days, and of course they have had the first day of discussions. Liu He arrived yesterday in Washington. He came with a smaller delegation, and this time he doesn't have the same negotiating power either, because he hasn't been given the designation of special envoy representing President Xi this time round. But we do know, as I say, that the two sides are going to be meeting later on in Washington to further discussions, but it's very hard to see how there can be any breakthrough. And of course China has said that it would retaliate as well, so that puts the conversation in another sort of level of tensity. So like I say, difficult for there to be any positive outcome for now, but perhaps the talks will continue even though the tariffs have kicked in now.
And following up to the trade negotiators failing to reach any breakthrough, China has said that it will retaliate. What could those retaliatory measures be?
Well, look, I think we've talked before that some of the measures are limited simply by virtue of the trade imbalance between the two countries. But there are still other methods that the Chinese could consider. In fact, both sides could, in fact, employ if they weren't to escalate tariffs on either end. For instance, making it difficult for businesses on both sides. Port entries in China may slow down. Businesses, American businesses in China, may find it a little bit more difficult to operate in the future. Certainly there doesn't seem to be much more appetite for either side to be increasing tariffs any further at this time. But as I say, China is confident in its manufacturing industry and that it will be able to maintain growth, and also perhaps its strategy is just to be more competitive in terms of manufacturing, because a lot of businesses still rely on the production that comes out of China. And so one thing that you may well see, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of devaluation in the renminbi, which makes China more competitive.
Thank you for your input, Patrick. That was Patrick Fock joining us from Beijing. Next, Iran has rejected the United States' offer to sit down for talks about its nuclear program. Officials from Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the U.S. will not dare take military action against Iran. Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump invited Iran's leadership for talks. Trump said he could not rule out a military confrontation given the heightened tensions between the two countries. These tensions escalated after the U.S. sent an aircraft carrier and a B-52 bomber to the Middle East. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the step was taken because of an imminent threat from Iran. And Iran has asked the European Union to uphold its obligations in the nuclear deal with Tehran. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said the bloc should normalize economic ties with Iran.
1 year after US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, the stakes are being raised in a dispute some fear could trigger a conflict in the Middle East. President Rouhani had set a 60-day deadline for world powers to implement their commitments made under the deal. Speaking after an EU summit in Romania, Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel said the EU wants to avoid escalation of the Iran dispute.
We do not want an escalation. We want to use further diplomatic means. We know our limits, but the more Europe is united, and this was the common position here, the better chances we have to implement chances and solutions through dialogue.
Condemning new US sanctions on Iran's metal sector, Russia said that Iran and world powers should meet to normalize the situation. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has urged Iran to hold talks over its nuclear program.
Moving on, the UN-backed Libyan government has suspended the operations of 40 foreign firms. The action has been taken to pressure Europe to stop Khalifa Haftar's offensive against Tripoli. The Libyan government said the firms have been suspended because of their expired licenses. A 3-month deadline has been given to renew the permits. French oil firm Total is among those suspended. The decree came a day after France appeared to refuse explicit support to the Libyan government against Khalifa Haftar's forces. In London, Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj met Britain's Theresa May and Jeremy Hunt in search of European support. Britain has urged the warring sides to return to the UN-led political negotiations. More from Iraq. At least 8 people have been killed in a suicide bombing in eastern Baghdad. 15 others have been injured in the attack. The bombing targeted a crowded area at a marketplace during Muslim holy month of Ramadan. ISIS has claimed responsibility. Iraq declared victory over ISIS in 2017, 3 years after the group took over vast strips of the country. Next, South Africa's opposition Democratic Alliance has expressed concerns over reports of voter fraud in the elections. According to the Election Commission, the ruling party is ahead of the Democratic Alliance with 35% more votes. Votes are being counted in South Africa's general election. Over 27% of district results have been declared, with the ruling party way ahead of rivals. Complete official results will be declared on May the 11th. The leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mmusi Maimane, has raised questions over the electoral process.
Of course, we've got concerns about the electoral process and how some of the issues have been handled. I'm concerned that many South Africans were able to vote twice, and therefore our call for an audit is still an important one because we think that needs to be interrogated.
In Central America, Belizeans have voted in favor of involving the International Court of Justice in its border dispute with Guatemala. In a referendum, over 55% of the country voted for The Hague's mediation. Guatemala recognizes Belizean independence but never accepted its borders. Both countries have agreed to allow their people to decide whether or not to involve the International Court. Guatemala has already decided to reach out to the World Court to settle the border issue. In the U.S., whistleblower and former intelligence officer Chelsea Manning has been released from prison after serving 62 days. Manning was held for contempt of court in the WikiLeaks case. She has been issued with a new summons ordering her to appear before another grand jury. Manning was convicted in 2013 of charges including espionage for leaking secret military files to WikiLeaks. She has been immediately summoned to appear before a new grand jury on May the 16th.
This is a contempt hearing. It's a sealed hearing. The public isn't allowed. The proceedings are going to happen in secret. The filings are sealed, so can't really talk about the specifics of what's going on beyond what we explained in the statement. But I'm pretty confident that we have a basis and a grounds in which to oppose this.
Moving on, Sudan's security forces have seized 241 kilograms of gold from a helicopter.
The country's Rapid Support Force said that the aircraft was due to land at Khartoum International Airport. General Othman Mohammed of the Rapid Support Force said that only 93 kilograms of the gold had been cleared for export.
And in an operation, after trying to leave the country and smuggle out its resources, a large amount of gold of around 241 kilograms has been seized. The manufacturing company is a Moroccan investment company. 93 kilograms of that amount was supposed to arrive yesterday in order to be exported abroad.
The aircraft was seized in Sudan's River Nile state. Authorities say the aircraft was due to land at Khartoum International Airport.
In Venezuela, 2 other lawmakers have sought refuge at foreign embassies to avoid the government's crackdown. President Nicolas Maduro continues to seize allies of opposition leader Juan Guaido, who supported last week's coup attempt. Richard Blanco of the Brave People's Alliance has been seen entering Argentina's embassy. The Radical Cause Party leader Americo de Grazia has sought refuge at the Italian embassy. Both politicians are among 10 lawmakers stripped of congressional immunity by the Supreme Court. The court ruled that legislators should be investigated for conspiracy, treason, and rebellion. The opposition do not recognize the court's decisions, as they say Maduro has stocked it with his own supporters. Elsewhere, a Montenegro court has sentenced 2 alleged Russian spies to jail over 2016 coup plot. 2 opposition politicians were also among the 14 convicted for an attempted rebellion. According to court ruling, the convicted intended to take over parliament and assassinate Prime Minister to set up pro-Russia, anti-NATO leadership. Alleged GRU agents were handed sentences of 15 and 12 years in absentia, whereas Andrija Mandej and Milan Knežević, leaders of the Democratic Front, received 5 years jail each. The court building and the surrounding area was heavily guarded by armed policemen. Meanwhile, the United States has seized a North Korean cargo ship it accused of illicit coal shipments in violation of US and UN sanctions. The announcement comes after North Korea test-fired 2 short-range missiles, stoking tensions with the US and its regional allies.
Talks between North Korea and the US stalled when the Hanoi summit failed to reach a deal to end Pyongyang's nuclear program. Since then, both the sides have been at loggerheads over Pyongyang's denuclearization. US President Donald Trump has said he does not think North Korea is ready to negotiate a deal.
Well, we're looking at it very seriously right now. They were smaller missiles, short-range missiles. Nobody's happy about it, but we're taking a good look, and we'll see. We'll see. The relationship continues. But we'll see what happens. I know they want to negotiate. They're talking about negotiating, but I don't think they're ready to negotiate.
South Korea says the latest missile launch by North has threatened to complicate nuclear negotiations with the US. President Moon Jae-in said the latest missile test by North was probably a subdued protest against the US after a failed summit in Hanoi.
It's time for us to take a short break. Don't go anywhere.
मेरे रिश्तेदार, मेरे लोग कहा करते थे, ये पागल है, मास्टर मोहम्मद अयूब मेरा नाम है। मैं सिविल डिफेंस का एक वर्कर हूँ। लोगों को जब किसी की मदद करते रोते और पीटते मैं देखता था तो मैं दिल से ये सोचता था कि इन लोगों की रोज़ मदद करूँ, लेकिन हादसा तो रोज़ नहीं होते। जब तक मेरी ज़िंदगी है, जब तक मेरे जिस्म में एक कतरा भी खून का है, मैं इन बच्चों को पढ़ाऊँगा और आगे लेके जाऊँगा। सन 1982 में एक बच्चे से शुरू किया था। शुरू के वो 6-7 बच्चे आज मुख्तलिफ महकमों के अंदर, एक लड़का LDC है, एक बच्चा असिस्टेंट है, एक बच्चा सुपरिटेंडेंट है। तो यहाँ पर मेरे पास ज़्यादातर आप देखेंगे बच्चियाँ हैं। मैं इनको तरजीह देता हूँ। इन बच्चों से मैं कोई फीस नहीं लेता। हम हर महीने में अपनी तनख्वाह से थोड़े थोड़े जमा करते हैं। इनके लिए पेंसिलें, इनके लिए कापियाँ, इनके लिए किताबें, लेकिन सबके लिए नहीं, सिर्फ गरीब यतीम बच्चों के लिए। 2015 में सदर पाकिस्तान ने मुझे सदारती अवार्ड से नवाजा। अभी 2018 30 मार्च को पाकिस्तान में 2 अवार्ड हैं। एक मुझे मिला है, बल्कि बरतानिया ने दिया मुझे। तो ये थोड़ी इज्जत है, मैं सिर्फ ये पाकिस्तान के लिए कर रहा हूँ।
Welcome back after the break. In Pakistan, the Foreign Office has urged the World Bank to fulfill its responsibility of resolving water disputes with India. Foreign Office spokesman Dr. Mohammad Faisal said that India is violating the Indus Waters Treaty. Pakistan is involved in a dispute resolution mechanism with the World Bank, but the matter has not been sorted out yet. Foreign Office spokesperson Dr. Faisal said Pakistan wants better relations with India. Responding to a question, he said Pakistan has consistently been raising the Kashmir dispute at all the international forums. He also said that Pakistan advocates a peaceful settlement of the Afghan conflict. Earlier, India's Union Minister Nitin Gadkari threatened to stop Pakistan's share of water under the Indus Waters Treaty. Gadkari said the government is planning to divert river waters flowing into Pakistan to the Indian states of Rajasthan, Punjab and Haryana. In another development, the US and Taliban representatives have completed the 6th round of peace talks in Doha. A Taliban official said some progress has been made on a draft agreement seeking withdrawal of foreign troops from Afghanistan. The US has sought assurances that the Taliban will not allow insurgents to use Afghanistan to stage terror attacks. Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid said both sides are now discussing the issues and developments confronting the next round of talks. Next, European Council President Donald Tusk said, rule of law is the essence of EU's political activity and entity. European Union leaders met in Romania for an informal summit to discuss the bloc's issues.
Against the background of Brexit uncertainty, EU leaders are hammering home the importance of unity. On the agenda at the summit in the Romanian city of Sibiu are issues as diverse as migration, democratic standards and climate change. European Council President Donald Tusk underlined the importance of an independent judiciary.
Unfortunately, we can talk today about a very dangerous trend in the global politics, and this desire in some governments to reduce the rule of law or independence of judiciary system. Yeah, this is something visible not only in Europe, And this is why everything, or almost everything, is in your hands.
Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel stressed that a uniform European solution will take time.
I'm not striving for a uniform European solution. That will take a very long time. We can only discuss finding a coalition of the willing. We know, for example, that our neighbor, the Netherlands, are also going through a process where they're discussing prices and certificate trading.
France's President, Emmanuel Macron, said he wants the top EU jobs going to strong and competent people. Meanwhile, elections to the European Parliament will be held between the 23rd and the 26th of May.
And in the Vatican, Pope Francis has changed the church law to make reporting sex abuse cases obligatory. The law will require clerics to report any case to church superiors and allow anyone to complain directly to the Vatican.
Tackling sexual abuse cases that have battered the Catholic Church's reputation has been a challenge for Pope Francis since 2013. World's 1 million priests and nuns are now obliged to report abuse, even in countries where the civil law does not require this.
I think that the law is important because it gives a clear statement of an obligation. I think the obligation has always been there, but experience shows us that either a closed shop mentality or a misplaced interest in protecting the institution was hindering disclosure.
Pope Francis said in the decree that it is time to learn from the bitter lessons of the past. It follows a series of assault cases in countries ranging from Australia to Chile, Germany and the US. The victims had also demanded that the Vatican should make reporting of suspected abuse mandatory.
The law is very important because it makes disclosure as the main policy of the Church. It is a very strong message that disclosure is the order of the day.
The law only applies within the Church and does not involve the civil authorities. The edict came 3 months after the Pope summoned heads of all national bishops' conferences for a summit on sexual abuse.
The U.S. energy corporation Chevron has abandoned its pursuit of buying Anadarko petroleum. The decision has left its rival Occidental Petroleum as the likely victor in the contest to buy Anadarko petroleum. The announcement comes 3 days after Anadarko characterized Occidental's $38 billion bid as superior to Chevron's. The number 2 U.S. oil producer, Chevron, now stands to receive $1 billion